All right, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Living Better podcast. Today we are with Matthew Stapley, psychic medium based in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And today it's going to be a very exciting interview. I know this is kind of controversial for a lot of people. We discovered Matthew, me and my wife, last year in 2019 when my dad committed suicide. It was very fast. He left a letter with a lot of unanswered questions that I had, and my wife suggested to meet with Matthew. And I wasn't into psychic or mediums, and I wasn't too keen on it, but I said, why not? I needed closure, and I went to see Matthew, and he was amazing.
Yeah, he really was.
I don't know the guy, and he came up with
He said
the
things
most accurate
yes.
things ever in regards to my dad, my life, and my surroundings. So
yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, so that got me to believe a lot more into it. And today we're going to talk about all that. And for those of you that are skeptical, keep an open mind, listen to the whole thing. You can make your own ideas out of it. And for the other ones that believe in psychic and mediums and the afterlife, will enjoy the show.
Yeah.
So, hi, Matthew.
Of course. Hi, Matt. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you both for having me on your podcast. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, we're very excited to have you. So first, how about you tell all the viewers a little bit about yourself, and when did you realize that you had this gift?
Well, it started off when I was very young. The first time, the first time that I remember seeing something or feeling something, I was about 8 years old. The first time my parents saw these things, my mom told me once that I was very young, like 2 or 3. I ended up being on the phone with my dad when he was traveling in Thailand, and I got on the phone with him, and all of a sudden I just got this weird feeling that came over me, and I began to see things in my mind's eye, and I said, "Dad, what are those big teeth sitting beside you on the table?" And he said, "Those are elephant tusks. How did you know that they were there?"
Wow.
Because of course this was like the early 90s, like way before video chat happened. So it was just a phone call. And then I went on to describe the room he was sitting in. And then I said, and outside there's a fountain. And he said, "No, there's no fountain outside." And I said, "Dad, I can hear it. There's a fountain." And he said, "Matthew, even if there was, I'm inside with the door closed. You wouldn't be able to hear it." And I said, "We'll go check." So he went outside and he said, "Well, there's a swimming pool, but there's no fountain." And then I said, "Oh, it's on the wall with the lizard." So he looked around, and I guess there was big stone walls surrounding the back of this property. And he saw a big lizard on the wall. So he went over, and I don't know if it was a real lizard or a painted one. I've never asked actually, but he went over to this wall with a lizard, and there was a bit of a rock garden. And then there was this little tiny fountain that he couldn't even hear standing beside it. So I was hearing it was called clairaudiently, which is psychically hearing it through the phone. So that was the first big experience that I remember having.
Wow, that's amazing. So how did that make you feel at that very young age? Like, you knew that you were different, right? Not everybody is blessed with this gift. How did that make you feel at a young age?
I don't think I was aware of exactly what it meant.
Okay.
At the time, I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. I didn't really think of what it meant. And it was kind of quiet after that for a little while. And then when I was 12 or 13, I was 8 years old when that happened. So I was 11 years old then. And my grandfather visited me in the middle of the night after he passed away many years before. And he woke me up, and I remember being terrified because I could kind of see him, and I could hear him, and I could feel that I wasn't alone in the room. And so, of course, me being 11, I ran into my parents' room, and my mom was sleeping. And I said, "Tell Grandpa to leave me alone." And she was like, "Yeah, okay." Told him, go back to bed, go back to bed.
Yeah.
I went back and I fell asleep, and I woke up again, and he was standing beside my bed. I could see him really clearly. And he told me all of these things to tell to my mom and my grandmother and my aunt. And he mentioned an estranged uncle. And I knew this uncle when I was very, very young, but we hadn't seen him in years, and nobody told me why. But my grandfather told me why.
Wow.
And also that he would come back in 10 years.
Wow.
And exactly 10 years later, he showed up in my parents' driveway to talk to my mom. So
that's unbelievable, eh?
It was very, yeah. And so these experiences just kept happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so how old, like, were you when you started doing this as a profession?
I was 17.
Wow. So
Yeah,
you started very young.
I did, yeah. I was very fortunate to have a best friend whose family was kind of, into these things. And they knew a lot about it, and he knew a lot about spirituality. His name is Chris, and he was the one who taught me how to interpret the colors that I saw around people.
Okay.
And so he kind of gave me this sort of idea of how to interpret these things. And so I would do that. And professionally, it started when I was at a French class. My grandmother was French Canadian, and she decided one day to never speak English to me again, which for someone who doesn't speak French was challenging.
Of course.
I was taking a French class outside of school. And so it was the first day where the tutor brought all of us together because we had been tutored separately in French. And then he brought us all together to learn conversational French. And so we all had to talk about different aspects of, things that we like to do. And it ended up coming out that I could see auras. And this lady said, she said, "Oh, well, what do you see around me?" So I told her, and very personal things were coming through that she hadn't told anybody. And they were very challenging things that she was going through. But at the end, the message was, "You're going to be totally okay. Like, even though it's hard right now, you're going to get through this."
Okay.
And so she started crying, and then I hugged her and she left. And I felt like a giant, asshole for making her cry.
Yeah, of course.
And then I turned around, and the lady whose house we were all at, her jaw was like on the floor, and she said, "That was awesome." And I said, "Well, I feel bad for making her cry." She said, "I don't care." She's like, "I'm going to give you money to come and read at my family reunion."
Wow.
So I did, and I had tarot cards and things like that.
Okay.
So I went and did readings, and then after that, I just started getting phone calls from all over Eastern Ontario, from people that knew the people I had read for at the party, and that's really how it started.
So it was word of mouth in the beginning, and then you just became more popular as time went on.
Yes.
Do you still use tarot cards right now, or is it strictly you like just doing more one-on-one reading or family readings?
Yeah, so I do just one-on-one readings. I don't use tools professionally very often. I know I do enjoy tarot a lot. I think it's a beautiful method of divination and connecting, but me personally, I don't use any tools, no.
Okay.
And if you just allow me, so to dumb it down for people, because we're talking all those terms, but some people don't know what tarot cards are. Some people don't know the definition of psychic, what is a medium and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So could you explain that a little bit more for the people that are unaware of what it is? So you have two gifts, right? You're a psychic and a medium.
Yes.
Yes. And then I'll explain why other mediums hate me with my definitions of psychic and medium.
Okay, of course.
So the standard definition, like, without my input, the standard definition is psychic ability is the ability to perceive information without actually having any earthly way of knowing it, right?
Yeah.
A medium is somebody who can connect with the spirit world specifically and bring messages through from other people's loved ones. So that's the standard definition. Personally, and this is where a lot of mediums get mad at me, is I believe mediumship is a psychic specialty like every other psychic ability.
Of course.
And the reason why other mediums don't like that is mediumship is sort of seen as like the higher level of psychic ability or psychic phenomena. And I just believe that somebody can receive messages from spirit, whether they're using tarot cards, whether they're using crystals, whether they're using nothing. And mediums can also be like me, who can receive things directly without the use of tools. So yeah, those are the standard and then my interpretation of the definitions of psychic and medium.
So your first skill was a psychic, basically, right? When you knew where the fountain was and the backyard. And so you didn't connect with spirits at that age?
No, although my mom and dad told me that I was. I'm just not, I don't remember it. I guess there were times when other family members passed away where I was telling people that I was seeing them around and things like that. But the first was called evidential experience, which is where the person can bring through things they have no way of knowing. That's called evidential mediumship. The first experience that I remember was 11 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did that scare you when you started? Like, did it increase exponentially as you aged? Like, you would have more spirits come to you out of nowhere?
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. And it was scary at first on sleeping pills. prescribed by a psychiatrist at like 10, 11 years old.
Okay.
Because I would lie in bed and I would just be aware of these shadows in the
Shadows that are
room.
around.
Wow.
And they always looked like people. The first time that happened, I was 7, and I was lying in bed, and I woke up and I saw these shadow silhouettes like moving through the room of people. And when they walked past my dresser, everything fell off of it, and then they disappeared. When I woke up, I thought, wow, that was a weird dream. And I looked at the floor, and all the things from my dresser were on the floor.
Wow.
And I never slept in that room again.
Of course not. Like, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So that was definitely probably a challenge, right, for you to have this gift at a young age. And that was actually my next question. Yeah. What can you kind of say the pros that you felt and also the cons of having this gift, and how do you deal, with the cons? Because you can't change this gift. I feel anyways, or maybe you have a different opinion. But.
I agree with you. Yeah. I think, the pros drastically outweigh the cons. The cons are, and this is true for most mediums have anxiety problems. Okay. Most mediums feel like misunderstood, especially when they're in their younger years. So that's a con. I think that I'm what's called a physical medium, which means that sometimes weird phenomena happens around me when I'm working or reading, like knocking on the walls. I've had lots of lights flicker. I've had things fall off the walls. I've had all kinds of weird things happen around me. And so that can be a little bit jarring. So that's like a con at first, but it becomes cool over time, I guess.
Yes.
The pros, I think, are amazing because we can help people with this gift. We can bring people understanding and peace, not only from their loved ones in spirit, but also all the things on their path, right, that they are dealing with. Because sometimes people will come to me and they may not have anyone that they want to talk to who's passed, but they may have, a divorce, or they're through a personal hardship. And so even though their loved ones, they may not have loved ones to come forward, they still have ancestors, they still have spirit guides who can weigh in on these things. And so what can happen within a session really just depends on why the person has come to see the medium. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it can be a confirmation of something. Mm-hmm. I've even had somebody come one time that was looking for information in their family history that they couldn't find about their birth parents. Wow. And I was able to help them find the exact location of where their birth family was. And now they've been in contact, and it's been DNA confirmed that is their family. So, there's
incredible.
And that's a crazy, weird story, by the way.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So that's
definitely,
would you say one of your most successful stories?
Yeah, I would say it's one of my favorites for sure. Of course. And the only reason I'll even mention is because she posted publicly on my page about it a few years ago. So I know that she's okay with people knowing about it. But basically what had happened was she came to me looking for her birth family or birth father. And I saw London, and then north of London. And then I saw a year or something, and then that there was a house fire, and I saw a newspaper, and then a name came through, and then I saw something about like the word dad was crossed out, but uncle was written beside it, or I don't remember exactly, but it was something like that. Mm-hmm. And she found out that north of London, there was a place in that town, there was a house fire, and it was that year, and there was one newspaper article that described 2 survivors of the fire. One of them was her father. The other one was her uncle. And her father passed away before she could meet him. But she was able to confirm through the uncle that it was her father. And they did a DNA test to prove it.
Wow, that's incredible.
So that was a very cool.
That's an amazing story.
Yes,
so,
of course.
If we talk about how does it work for you, like you were saying, spirit guy, and like I said, I'm always the one who dumbs it down for people that don't know and understand, because we have a broad spectrum of listeners.
Yes.
Oh, I think it's great. You're asking great questions.
Yeah. So if you could explain how it works for you. So what are spirit guides? When you meet a client that you see either their future or their path, what is a path? Do we all have a set path?
Yes.
And all those questions that people might have.
Also, does everybody have the exact same amount of spirit guides, or is it all different?
All right. Well, let's break it down.
One at a time.
Yeah. So spirit guides. So everybody has spirit guides no matter what, and they all have at least 2. And spirit guides generally accepted. It's generally accepted that spirit guides are beings that we don't necessarily know from our time here on earth. So they're not our loved ones or our friends or family in spirit.
Okay.
And we have a soul understanding with them that they will guide us. Now, other religions may refer to that as guardian angels. In spiritualism, spirit guides and angels are seen as different things. Okay. But I think if you were to translate that to different traditions, they might say guardian angel. They might say, just guide or whatever, or ancestors. So that's spirit guides. Our loved ones are our family, friends that we knew that passed on, including fur family, by the way. Animals come through for people all the time.
Amazing.
Then we have our ancestral spirits, which are the ones that we descend from. And I could tell you another cool story about that if you want to hear it. But
of course.
Sure.
And that's our spirits that we descend from, like our great whatevers that we've never met, but they are a part of our path, genetically, but also energetically. And then we have angels and guardian angels. And our guardian angels, I believe everyone has at least one, and they're walking with us on our path as well. Our spirit guide's job is to help us to understand our life path, to help us to maximize on our life experiences. So their job isn't to stop bad things from happening. Their job is to guide us through bad things to make sure we learn what we're supposed to learn from it. And so does everybody have the same number of them? That's hard to say. I think everyone has at least two, but I've seen some people with like 7 or 8 that step forward, and other people with 2 or 3 that come forward. So
they were getting the extra help.
They are. And we also have spirit helpers as well, which are different than guides, and their job is to do things on behalf of the spirit guides. And so, I mean, these are all theoretical ideas and concepts, of course. We can only go with what we perceive. I think at the end of the day, nobody really knows how it all works. That's for sure. I know I don't. I know I can connect. I don't know how.
Yes.
In specific. So, that's how I would answer that.
I think that's a great statement. And the fact that, people try to have the answer for the afterlife. And I was going to ask you, what's your take on life and the afterlife and all of that?
Sure. Yeah.
And by your answer, it means that, nobody really knows the answer. And it's
no.
So there's different religion and stuff. So I don't know it yourself. If you were raised in Christianity, were you raised in a sort of religion?
I was raised in Catholicism at a young age. And then, when I was about 11, I started learning about earth religions, like, paganism, neo-paganism. I learned about Aboriginal belief systems. I learned about all of these things. So as a teenager, theology was like the top of my list of interests. So I soaked in as much as I possibly could. And, I really believe in something. It's a concept. It's a very old concept called Prisca Theologia, which means that there's one thread of truth that runs through all religions, all belief systems, all traditions. And even though everything around that Prisca Theologia might be different, there's still this one commonality within all things. And in my study of religion, not only in my own time, but also when I was becoming a minister in my 20s, I learned a lot about all these faith paths. And I would agree, there is something called Prisca Theologia. And that seems to be that love trumps all other things. Love is the greatest thing. And I think it's love that allows for our connection to our loved ones to exist even after their passing. I think it's purely that allows that to be there.
I agree. Right. I tell you that all the time, Maddie. What everybody needs in life is just love. That's the purest thing that you need to feel free to be happy and eternal happiness.
Absolutely.
So back before when you were talking about colors, do you mind going more in depth about what does that exactly mean? And does everybody has a different color, like, and how?
Totally. So it's the aura. So everyone's energy field, and everyone also being animals and plants as well, by the way, and stones even, have energy points that run along their body. And those energy points create a diffusion of energy. And then that diffusion of energy is called the aura. And then within all of that, there's also different, what's called energic bodies, right? So we have our physical body, our emotional body, mental body, our ethereal body. And these are layers of our consciousness. And then, of course, the next question I always get is, well, if we have this, how come we can't see it on some kind of a scan, right? And the reason why we can't is because we don't have science that can see that. And for the same reason that we don't have science that can see that, we also don't have science that can truly test psychic ability, because that's a whole other conversation, but we just don't. Our current model does not allow for it. So the aura is a diffusion of energy, basically. And within that diffusion, people can pick up on or see different aspects of it that will show us what that person is going through, if there's issues in their
Wow.
body. Even some mediums can see illnesses
Okay.
very successfully and very
Unreal.
pinpoint accuracy with it. And I actually believe everybody can see auras or learn to feel them. It's not hard to do. When I
Okay.
teach courses in development, the first thing I show people is how to do that.
Wow, I'd love to learn. That'd be amazing. And when you were saying that, can your auras change over time then? Your colors can change when you go through different things?
They can change in a second, yes.
Wow, they can change in a second. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, they can. I've even seen an aura change through the process of a reading. Like as I was reading the person and they were releasing their pain, their aura was changing.
That's amazing.
No,
so
it is.
On that note, based on your abilities, have you ever used them for yourself to either, help you through life, guide you through life, help you find stuff that you lost, whatever?
I wish I could. No, I think, there was a psychic, a famous one years ago named Sylvia Brown. And she was asked that question. She said, well, it would be like a surgeon operating on themselves.
Yeah.
And I thought, frig, that's exactly the right answer. I think some people can. I personally can't. I've tried. I've tried. I always afraid of or what I hope will happen, but never actually what does happen. I think the reason why is to do an accurate reading, you have to be objective, right? So I won't even read for people that I know very well, like friends and family, because once I know things about them, then I have my own idea of what I hope to see.
Wow.
And I just personally can't pull those apart. So my optimal client is one whose name I forgot, and then when they walk in, they give me their first name and we start the reading. The more a medium knows about the person they're reading, the less effective they'll actually be, in my opinion.
That's amazing.
So the more impartial the better, because you don't have any assumption as humans, right? We have assumptions.
Exactly. And so when people go and see a medium, like they should never be asked for any information about themselves. When you go, in my mind, at an ethics and integrity level, you should be able to sit there either in person or on video or on the phone or however you're having your reading. You should be able to say, how are you today? Great. Let's do the reading. And that medium should begin to bring through information that makes sense to you. Without any prompting from you. Now, there is something called asking for validation, where the medium at some point will say, is this making sense to you? But they should do that after they've provided some substantial evidence, like not just like, okay, has your mom passed away? Does that make sense to you? Okay, was she young? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
of course.
You've got to give I believe you've got to give a bit of a picture first so that you're not fishing for information.
Okay.
And I think that's great you're mentioning that, because my experience with you was exactly that. You knew nothing about myself. You didn't ask any questions and just confirm what I say, because people think that mediums and psychics are con artists sometimes.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, sometimes they are.
Sometimes, they might be.
Sometimes they are. Like same with some doctors are crappy and only want their money. And some
exactly. Like everything.
Contractors will screw you over as well. Like I think it's in every industry. I think the reason why it's so focused on ours is that we kind of do something a little bit intangible, and it's not really explainable. If you go and see a crappy doctor, another doctor is going to be like, wow, that was terrible. Or if you call a contractor, they'll say that was bad and this is why. But with psychic phenomena, I mean, I think there's huge limitations to how we can even understand it. So I think that's why there's such a focus on charlatanism in our industry.
Yes,
absolutely, I agree. And have you ever had an experience where no spirit guides, or you weren't seeing any colors of a person? And why do you think that happens?
Oh, it totally happens. Like I would say 1 in every 20 or 30 people are exactly that. Like they'll sit in front of me and I'll close my eyes and literally nothing happens. And I tell them to keep their money and go find somebody else to help them.
Interesting.
I think it could be a few reasons. So one of the reasons is mediums can only pick up on things that they have an awareness of on some level. For example, if I brought through a name from spirit for you, I would only be able to do that if I had heard that name before somewhere else in the world or in my life. somebody was trying to come through and give me a name and I had never heard it, there was no what's called reference points for it, I would get nothing. I also believe sometimes that I just may not be the right person for them, that somebody else might do a much better job than I could for whatever they're coming through or whatever they need to come through with. So, I think it could be a multitude of reasons. I don't believe that somebody who's skeptical will alter the reading. I know a lot of people say if you're skeptical, it won't work. I don't believe that's true.
Okay.
That said, if someone tells me they're skeptical, I get really nervous and I probably mess it up.
But then you probably overthink it, maybe gives you a little bit of anxiety too. So that doesn't help.
100%. Yeah. But I actually find that people who are in a lot of pain and are hardcore skeptics are the ones that actually seem to get the best readings, because spirit will come through at whatever intensity they need to for that person to have a positive experience. And so if someone doesn't believe that anything happens when you die, and yet they're there out of desperation because they've tried all the psychologists and psychiatrists and the counselors and nothing's helping them with their grief, then they might be more open to trying this. In fact, that's happened several times in my career. And they get the best readings because they need the shakeup in order to have the healing experience. And yeah.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's amazing. And as well, if ever out in public, do you ever get messages out in public and you just have the urge to go and tell this person something like you see on the TV, or that's just
not really. Sometimes I feel things. Okay. For example, this was in the fall, I think in September, October, I was at karaoke one night and I kept feeling this spirit and they were just talking my ear off. So I wrote it down and I posted it online and somebody immediately claimed it. Another time I was at a hair salon and I was sitting there having a great time and my anxiety just started going up and I was like, oh, what the crap is going on?
Yeah.
And I said, I closed my eyes and in my head, I said, who's here? And I saw this homeless man spirit yelling at me and he was yelling names and causes of death and all this stuff at me. So I just decided to write it down. So I grabbed my phone and I made a Facebook post on my professional page. And I think it was within half an hour, somebody commented saying, that's my uncle.
Wow.
And so, yes,
amazing.
It is interesting. It doesn't usually happen where I'll see somebody in a room and I'll feel like Aunt Ethel needing to talk to them right away. Thankfully, I think that would drive me crazy.
Yes.
I do know that some mediums do experience that. I think my thing with it on an ethics and integrity level is it's fine to approach somebody with a message as long as you realize that you have all day to get them through however their emotions are when you tell them that.
True.
That you don't just sort of message and leave them.
Damage them.
And then just bye-bye.
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
Right. You're right about that.
I'm the same with my clients. If I've got a client having a breakdown and someone else knocking at the door, that person has to wait because I need to make sure somebody is in better condition when they leave than they are when they come.
Wow.
And that's important to me. It's like campsite rules. When you go to a camp, say leave your site in the same or better condition than when they arrived. That's my goal when I read, is that the person leaves either the same or better than when they came.
So on that note, do you sometimes omit to say negative things just not to damage the person? Or?
No, I will say everything that comes through.
Amazing.
Yeah, always. And in my experience, there really isn't anything negative that comes through. No, and I don't believe that they're going to give what's called I call it terminal information, which is information that could not do anything about. Your loved one is going to die tomorrow, or don't cross the street on Wednesdays, or whatever ridiculous warnings might come up. I don't believe that spirit will truly do that, because here's the thing, we're not always right. We're not. We could be great mediums and we can still be wrong. And there are times where we are. And so if the purpose is to bring healing to somebody, then how would fear really help them to do that? Fear clogs you up. It blocks your flow. And healing is all about restoring flow within the person and within their life. So if we put somebody in fear consciousness, that is the opposite of what's going to be helpful. And spirit knows that. So will they talk about challenging things? Absolutely. Will it be sometimes hard to hear truths? Yes. But will they also tell you how to get through it, or how to go over or around that mountain? Absolutely. So it's kind of like a yes and a no at the same time.
Yeah. So it's a positive as well at the end with that. If there's a negative message,
always.
Through,
exactly. I don't think they're going to say your cat Muffy is going to die on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Unless they said your cat Muffy is going to die on Tuesday, but guess what? Your amazing blessing is going to be there at the same time. So that's just my beliefs. I know other mediums talk about, scary things that will happen. I just never see it. Like, they never tell me those things.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. That's a good thing, right?
Yeah. Sometimes they'll say, like, if somebody asks a question and they say, should I invest in this company? And I see it going to crap in about 4 minutes, I'll tell them what I see always. But will the information be negative on its own? No.
Okay, that's amazing. Do you ever get also little message, like for little kids, like do you see when like little children have the psychic ability or the gift that you have, and do you share that, or do you tell their parents, like, because at a young kid, like you said before, when you were young, that was a scary feeling.
It was. Yeah. I tell people whatever I see. And I actually have had over the years many parents bring their children to me.
Wow.
Many parents, like countless. And they'll usually call my assistant and they'll say, oh, my child is up all night saying that they see ghosts. Is there anything you can tell us? And so I do readings as one type of the service I offer, but I also offer what I guess you could call gift consultations, which is if somebody has a gift or wanting to develop the natural psychic ability that all of us possess, I do consultations to show somebody and help somebody explore what their gift is, and then advice on how to either cope with it or advance in it. So I do that as well for people on a regular basis. Yeah.
That's amazing.
And on that journey of expanding gifts, if you talk about yourself, what have you personally done to enhance your abilities or to increase your knowledge or, your understanding of all of that?
That's a wonderful question. Basically, it's just sort of developed on its own. And I think a lot of the time for anybody in or really anything, I think the learning is in the doing, right? Mm-hmm. So the more we practice, the better we get. Yeah. And I think that's just like anything else in life. So I noticed, like, when I first started, I used tarot cards and saw auras to do a reading on purpose, because there's a difference between receiving something on its own and making yourself receive something. So those are different things. And so I started with tarot cards. And then after a car accident, I remember I was laying the cards out for a client, and I was, did the reading, and she said, wow, all of that was just in those 3 cards. And I realized I didn't even look at the cards.
Wow.
Like something's
you were using
here.
Something and not even care about it.
Yeah, I didn't even look at it. And then, so what I did for about a year was I would lay the cards out and I wouldn't look at them, and I would just read. And then after a while, I just stopped laying the cards out. But I think it always develops the more we use it.
And to go back on tarot cards, we didn't expand on what it was earlier. Yeah. So, while we're throwing so many questions at you, there's just so much you can answer.
I've got a deck of tarot cards right here.
So if you could explain to listeners, what are tarot cards? How do they work for you, and how do you use them, or how anybody else would use them?
Yeah, so this is a deck of tarot. This is a very weird tarot deck. I'm going to say that. This is not a traditional tarot deck, but there are 78 cards in most tarot decks, and it's separated into 2 different groups. So one is the major arcana, and the major arcana would be like this card. That's the death card. So that's an example of major arcana. It does not mean death, by the way. It means transformation. This is the world card. That's another major arcana card. And the major arcana is sort of like the overarching big lessons in life, or the big concepts, like death being transformation. The first card of the entire tarot is the Fool, which is about a new journey beginning and all of that. The second card is the Magician, which is about like our own ability to manifest things, to make things happen, the ability to transform. And then there's the Minor Arcana, which is similar to a playing card deck, where you have from Ace to the King of the suit, and each suit means something different. And so when you're using tarot, you're basically shuffling the cards with the intention that you're putting them in the appropriate order. You're connecting to spirit or the universe, and then you lay the cards out either in a spread or in just in whatever way you want, and the cards paint a picture of an answer to that question, or a picture to what's going on in that person's life. It's very
So you
cool.
would pick those cards out of spirits going through you too.
No, I think they pick it. Don't, because I've done I've gotten tarot cards done on me before, but don't we have to choose the deck?
Not necessarily. Everyone reads differently. Like when I read, I don't let people touch my cards. I do all the shuffling, the cutting.
Wow. Okay. So there's both.
Like if I cut the deck right now, the Lovers card just showed up and I'm talking to you guys.
Wow, no way.
And then
awesome.
the Death card comes up. We're talking about transformation. We're talking about these big concepts. So that was just me cutting the deck. So, I think that we just basically have to trust it. We've got to trust what comes through as best we can. And so that's a tarot deck. There's also something called an oracle deck. And an oracle deck is different. So there's not usually suits or anything in an oracle deck. And they're basically just cards that have like inspirational messages on it. So this deck is Lantern of the Soul, which is actually my deck. I created it.
Oh, wow.
And so there's just different messages and artwork and things on all the cards. So with those ones, you can do the same thing. You can shuffle, you pull a card, read the message. Yeah.
That's amazing.
So you created that deck. How did that happen? And was that just because you wanted to create your own thing to work with, or you want to sell it, or how does it work for you?
So people over the years kept telling me, Matthew, create guided meditations and create a card deck. And I never understood why, because one, I'm not an artist. And two, I always think that I sound like one of those 900 number late night workers who smokes 4 packs of cigarettes an hour. So I never understood it, but I decided to try it. So I do photography as a hobby. So I know have some editing skills, and I pulled up a card template one day and I just said, what the hell, I'll try it. And I made a card. And then I showed it to a friend of mine and she said, you should keep making these cards and see what happens. And so I did. And then I ended up publishing the deck with Game Crafter.
Wow.
And
good for you.
Thank you. And it's sold copies all over the world now. It's really fun. Yeah.
On that note, where can people get that deck if they're interested?
They can get it at the Game Crafter, and the link is on my website for that.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll plug that in the description later.
Thank you, guys.
So we're going to wrap up part 1 because I have more questions, and we're going to follow in part 2. Yeah. So thank you so much, Matthew, for your time for this part 1. Let's take a 5-minute break and we'll follow through on the second part.
Awesome. Sounds good.